About 8 o'clock, and it's time for the pastor's chat. Father Rob Arsenault. I'm here at Annunciation of the Lord Parish in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. And yeah, so I was messing with my collar. I was doing a bunch of emails, and then I popped online. I knew I was just a bit late, so I came online, and just again, this is a continuation. We've been doing this for some time now, and so I'd like to come on and just talk with you a little bit about what's kind of going on in my world, or what's going on in the parish, or things or trends that I'm seeing. And tonight it's going to be an interesting one. I'm going to talk a little about something. It's a little delicate. We're going to talk about the moves. Now the moves just came out, so the parish moves are pretty limited for us. Like, this is right across the whole diocese. So every year, right about this time, the diocese, announces, and every about 6 years or every 12 years, priests move around. Now, relax. Okay. Anyways, I'm not moving. Father John's not moving. Like, we're staying. As you know already, Father Joshua is moving to Toronto, and so there's some speculation on what happens next. Well, we can talk about it now. I think it's kind of official. It came out probably this afternoon. Soon to be Father Kevin Dewart, who's going to get ordained next week on the 17th, 18th. He's going to stay. So Kevin actually is from the parish, which is kind of interesting. That doesn't happen all that often. So Kevin will be ordained, and then when he is, he'll do his first mass here on that Sunday, and basically stay. He might have about a week. Give him a little vacation. We'll see what we can do. But basically, he starts, right? So we start with a brand new priest. We had Father Joshua starting here last year, and Father Kevin will be here, starting this year. So it's a little unusual we did that, but there's a whole bunch of backstory to that. So anyway, that's where it's going. So kind of exciting. So pray for Father Kevin as he gets ready, or soon to be Father Kevin. Deacon Reverend Mister, I think, is the title right now. But that's all good. Okay, so that's starting to happen. What I'm really thinking about is the full list came out, and I was first of all, it's extensive. Like, I was part of a little bit of that. We did some of that with the companions, and then we did some of that. I did a bit with the diocese. It's a lot of guys. Like, it's like 15 or 20, I think, altogether. And there's the French and the English side, and there's rural, and there's some senior guys, and there's some brand new priests, and there's some priests that are joining the diocese, and it's a very, very complicated formula. And what's all said and done, and really kudos to the team, there's a group that makes these moves. I think my cohort, Father Gerard Monahan, I think he's the other Episcopal vicar. He had a hand in really all of it, so God bless him, because it's not an easy job. So we got all that done, and then kind of almost like there's a big sigh, and you think, oh, okay, all the parishes, as far as I know, have a priest and will have some form of valid sacraments celebrated in the parish in the near future. Okay, more or less covered everything. Have we really solved the problem? Woo, there's a big question. You see, by managing to cover all bases and kind of some way sacrificing the notion of, okay, well, who's going to actually be able to grow their parish? Who's going to be able to bring renewal to their parish? Like, some of these guys have 3, 4, even 5 different parishes that they're responsible for. So yes, sacraments will be celebrated in those parishes, and that's good. That's good. It's a good thing. But does that bring renewal? Are they growing? Are they even sustainable? That's an entirely different question. It's a question we're beginning to ask at the diocese. It's kind of, if Father Monahan's role is to kind of fill those spots and to kind of manage that in some way, I think my role is director of faith and mission, is to say, okay, what is the mission then? How do we get them all working, not necessarily together exactly the same way, but all moving in the same direction? That all of our parishes would be growing, would become more vibrant, would be alive, would be financially sustainable. All of them were built with that intention. Like, we didn't just build random parishes all over the countryside and think, okay, I hope this works. There was a time when that was very much a need, and there was a base community there, and again, going back to the really old ones, it was a horse and buggy ride. And literally, how far can you drive a horse in an hour? That's about the limit. Horse goes out, horse goes back. You had to use it the next day for the farming. Like that's when you built the next town. That's when you built the next parish. But it doesn't make really sense anymore. Like, we do things differently, and and how we're going to manage these in the near future. And so all of us are going to have to start asking some pretty serious questions. And it affects all the parishes one way or the other. Like the country parishes often feel it the most because they're kind of at the shallow end of the pool. And here, I'm in a subdivision in Ottawa, and there's just probably 8 or 10,000 people that live within driving of my parish. So I have a lot more to pull from. And maybe the country places feel it first, right? They just don't have that same kind of density. But nonetheless, there are parishes that get 50, 60 people a weekend. We get that on a daily mass. Like, how do you sustain a parish? How do you pay a priest's salary? How do you maintain the maintenance? And what's been happening in a lot of cases is they've been cutting back on that. We just don't do maintenance, right? And this kind of just goes year after year, and nothing major happens, and the furnace works, and there's no major leaks, and until there is one. And then we have really big problems, and there's just no money to fix them, and there's no resource to draw from, and you've spread everything so thin that it just feels like there's nothing to do. Like you can't address the bigger issue of evangelization and about parish growth and parish renewal. Now these are big topics. I know, like I'm throwing stuff out here, and so I was like, oh God, what are we going to do? And I don't have a simple 5-point solution. And I think this is happening in many, many different facets. In the last couple of weeks, I've been talking about this. Like if you look at what I call a gray zone, a transition zone, I think we really are moving from what would have been an agrarian culture when we built some of these churches, right? As I said, a horse and buggy, literally a horse and buggy ride, to more industrialization when people moved to cities and got jobs in factories, to sort of a blue collar to a white collar. Certainly here in Ottawa, it's a government town, and there's all kinds of government, research, development, management agencies, working for the government. This is a very much, and then there's banking and there's insurance and there's all that kind of stuff that goes along with that, and so that all creates a certain kind of industry. But we've moved to this technological time now where we're almost going past where you can't afford to buy a house. Like, where do you live in Ottawa? It's getting, like, Toronto's been crazy for a while, but here in Ottawa, it's just, if you're a young family starting out, how even if both the couple work, I don't know how you afford that. And there's almost like there's a crunch time coming in, and people can't afford to live in the country. They can't afford gas to come into the city. And just the whole economics, like if my parents' time when you could still buy a house, and it's, I don't know, with inflation and things, but I think my parents, remember, they bought their place, and when we first moved to Kingston, I think it was $45,000 or something. It sounds almost ludicrous now. Like a car costs $45,000, but again, people weren't making as much money, and there's all that kind of factored in. But we're just in this great time where I think we're just building a subdivision, build a school, build a church. People come into the building. They get married, they have children, they marry other people, and you have more people. And that just worked. That was just Christendom, and it worked quite well. But we're in this different phase now where you just can't assume that people are going to go to the local parish. They're just not going to, if you just wait passively and hope people come out of sacramental need, I just don't think that's going to happen. And so there's sort of this sense of hospitality and outreach and just a radical accompaniment. I guess something we've been talking about a lot in our own parish just lately. How do we come alongside people who, for whatever reason, bump into us? Like it might be a funeral, maybe it's through the schools. If they're doing sacramental preparation, maybe they come to a funeral or a wedding. We have to make a connection with them and say, okay, what is it about these people? They seem different here. There's something attractive and likable, and it's the beginning. It's not everything. Obviously, they need to come into faith, and they need to experience Christ, and they need to come to know and understand what that means. But there's a shallow beginning to that, and this is core renewal. Like it just does not any one thing that has to be done. It's a lot of little things being done extremely well, consistently, so that people can experience something transcendent, something alternative to the secularism of our age. And it's a trick, and it's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of focus, and it challenges the status quo. And why can't we just do things the way we've always done them? Well, because how we got here is probably not going to be how we get out of here. I know that sounds maybe just like words, but think about it. How we got here was the tail end of Christendom. Where we go from here is a new apostolic age, where we're going to have to live like the early church lived. And it's going to be pretty lean, I think. It's honest. We're not going to have necessarily basilicas and school systems and all this stuff kind of backing us up. I just don't think you can count on that. Are we going to be able to have, salaries? Paul in the gospel, the book of Acts, he was a tent maker. He makes reference to it a number of times. Like that was his trade. So yes, he's well educated and he was a theologian and he wrote letters and he was a leader and established all these churches, and he sewed tents so that he would have an income that would provide for his needs, so that in his free time or his off time, he would serve the church. Now, I know it sounds pretty radical, but I don't know. I don't know what it's house churches. It's going to be. We just have to think differently, and it doesn't mean I have any one solution that's going to make this all fixable. We're just talking with another priest just recently, and he's going through this, I think, and he's got 3 or 4 churches and how they get down to one and what does that mean and how do you figure that all out? And it's a trick. It is not easy, and not everyone's going to like it, and not even it's going to be popular with it. But I think we talked about this, I think, last week. You can look down at the problem or up at the solution. And looking down at the problem is trying to manage base decline. I think I talked about this a little while ago. Or you lead in the Spirit. Now, again, nice words, right? It's easy to say those things. But just simply managing our problems means we never really address where we could be going or how our resources could be used differently to do, intentional outreach and things like we do with VBS. And I think we do this with the Holy Week Adventure. These are designed to draw people into the building that don't normally come here, not necessarily, or wouldn't necessarily think of that as a typical weekly event. And yet they experience something in those events that say, oh, wow, this is not the catechism, the sitting in catechism as a kid, not happy, not liking it, that I remember this is pretty cool. This moves along quite nicely. We do that with the, also we have a catechetical program, Good Shepherd, It's based on experiential things. Like it's a little smaller, but there's something in that I think is transformative, and I think has a potential to do that. Now, those are just 2 examples. There are many examples of those in the parish, and there's different ministries, and there's different outreaches, and different ways we do this, but it's done with excellence and really trying to keep that focus. That's going to have to be across the board, and it just is going to be a disruptive time. And I really feel for, the smaller parishes, or maybe some of the rural parishes, because I think they're going to feel it first, but everyone's going to feel it. And I think that first 1 or 2 is going to be really hard, where we start to amalgamate parishes and close and probably sell buildings, and people are going to be upset, and some people might leave and not come back. It's just too painful for them, and ouch, it seems to be counter to what we are as pastoral work, but I think it's absolutely necessary. There's a line, this is when I was in the East Coast a little bit, and when you talked about this in some of the rural places, they'd often talk about the history and say, well, my grandfather built this church and he sacrificed for it. And we always try to change the conversation and say that, and that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that gift, and thank you for the work they did. What about your grandkids? It's not about your grandparents, but your grandkids. Where are they in the faith? And often we get, well, they don't really practice it, and there lies the problem. We have to find a way. Now, it's not just a shaming or, kind of the good old days. I don't know if the good old days were that good, but there were days of Christendom when we could count on some things like the wider culture supporting the role of the church. And you just can't do that anymore. It just is not the reality that we face every day. Okay, accept that reality and get on with being church. And that might take different forms. It might, I think the best I ever heard on this was Bishop Robert Barron. He talked about the transcendentals, the true, the beautiful, the good, and the just. Again, those are just words, but to be, to make beautiful art. We're working on the new pictures. I think they're going to go in the sanctuary. So there's a transcendent beauty in that. We try to do basic outreach. There's a certain justice in that. So I'm doing now, I'm putting this idea out there in social media, and people will watch it, not thousands, probably 30 or 40, maybe 50 people at the most. But if you think, if it changes your mind and you start to see, oh, so this is for real. This is for real. This is for real. Now, will our parish, is this leading up to the big bomb? No, I don't think anyone's talking about closing Annunciation, our particular parish. But we'd have to think about all of them in that context. What if the bishop were to say to our zone, like, kind of the East End, and say, well, there's 7 parishes in the East End. I need you to get it down to 3. Would we make the cut? Like, do we have, I think there's almost like a 2x2 you can do on this. Like, what's our resource? Like, how much money do we have in the bank? How many people do we have? How many volunteers do we have? And across the other way would be the potential. They are building 10,000 homes, I think, just in the old air base and part of the military complex that was just sort of between us and Vanier. Okay, 10,000 homes. So there is some potential for us to grow. We're kind of tucked up against the river here, so we're geographically in a bit of a different situation, but we have some potential and we have some resource. I don't think we should ever sit back on our laurels and say, okay, we're fine. No, that's not true. But if parishes don't have much potential to grow and they don't have a lot of resource, then I think we have to look at that. And parishes that do, those are the easy ones. It might be a place like Barhaven that doesn't have much resource, but there's 100,000 people without a church. Like, I think that's an amazing growth opportunity. But what are we doing about that? And who's going to do it, right? These are big questions. Okay. What else did you have on for the summer? I'm sorry, I'm being a bit goofy here tonight, but sometimes I look at this stuff and I find it just overwhelming. And I think, what am I supposed to do? And then I think, okay, it's not what I do. It's really what Christ is doing. Does he truly love his church? Does he truly change hearts? Does he truly heal? Does again, this idea of not managing the decline, but actually leading in the Spirit? Could we plug into a revival in the Catholic faith that would warrant building some more buildings? And putting them more strategically in locations that don't have them right now, and shifting the resources that we have and to use them in a way that make more sense. Not perfectly, because we'll never get it perfect. We're not like a department store. We're not a food chain or gas stations. No, that's not what we do. But nonetheless, we could do what we can do more efficiently, and I think we can probably do a better job of it. But it's going to be thinking differently, and everyone's going to feel a bit of pain. I want to finish with just a metaphor. I heard this. I can't remember. I heard this. I think I heard it when I was in London. I'm not sure, but it was. It's an interesting little story. So I'll finish on this, and we'll call it a night. But there was a man who had a number of sons, and he was a shoemaker, and they were doing well. They're doing, that was their trade, and like Paul made tents. Well, they made shoes, and they did a pretty good job of it. And he wanted to expand, so he sent 2 of his older sons to other cities in kind of distant travels. I said, check it out. See, could we expand there? And the oldest son went to a city, and he wrote back to his father and said, Father, nobody in the city wears shoes. It's a waste of time. I'm coming home. And then a little while later, he got a letter from his second son who said, Father, there's nobody in the city who wears shoes. Send all of my brothers here. This is an amazing opportunity. We're gonna do really well here. So it's about the mindset. We could look at it and say, oh no, the churches are in decline. Christendom is over. The culture is hostile to our message. Let's just give up. Let's just circle the wagons and just hang on to the resource we have and let it dwindle away. Or, what a fantastic opportunity. I think the culture is ready to hear the good news. They've tried to do it on their own. I think people, maybe not everybody, but I think some people are ready to hear in transcendence and beauty and goodness, and that there is hope, and that yes, death would have a word, but not the final word, and that redemption is still possible, and forgiveness and peace and joy aren't just words on a card. They can be a lived reality and a spirituality and an orientation. Again, not that there's not going to be suffering in this world. There's always going to be suffering in this world, but it doesn't have to define us. It doesn't have to define us. Christ can do that. So it is. That's my prayer for you. So however you receive that, again, that's not a softening you up for the bad news, right? That we will continue. We'll have Kevin with us. You know, we look forward to that. We have many more years here, but we cannot, as a diocesan structure, continue as we've done. We must begin to think different, move different, and act different, and that will affect every single one of us. Okay, how does it start? And how does it start with me? You know, this is just the basic questions of what it is to be a Catholic in this age. So I hope you hear that. Hope you can receive it. And God bless you and keep you. Look after you, guide you, and protect you this kind of smoky, but nonetheless beautiful spring day. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.